Hello, and welcome to the Architecture of Rural Living, a podcast all about what it takes to build a home in the countryside. I'm Rebecca Baxter, Managing Director at Studio 11 Architecture.
And I'm Kris Baxter, Creative Director, and together we run an architectural practice specialising in rural homes.
So today, we're going to talk about one of the most popular ways to achieve planning permission in the countryside, the conversion of an agricultural building under Class Q. So Kris, what is Class Q?
So Class Q is a prior notification approach. So it's the General Permitted Development Order approach to obtaining permission to change an agricultural building to a dwelling.
Okay, brilliant. So what can we create under Class Q?
So what we're actually in essence doing is we're using the General Permitted Development Order right, and it's very specific. It sets out what you can do. So it's a maximum of 1,000 square meters. It's a maximum unit size of 150 square meters, and there are other parameters with that as well that effectively allow us to come up with a design that we would then take to the council and we'd say, okay, well, we're not applying for planning permission. What we're asking you to do is confirm whether you're happy that this meets the General Permitted Development Order approach, and then they say yes or no, and then that is the mechanism to which Class Q then allows you to then deliver a dwelling or those dwellings depending upon the size of the barns.
Okay, and it's a maximum of up to 10 dwellings, 10 units
Uh,
under Class Q.
It is, but obviously 10 at 150 square meters doesn't work because it'd be beyond the 1,000 square meters. So it's very nuanced. There's lots of different variations you can do, but yes, a maximum of 10 dwellings.
Okay, and to clarify on the point of permitted development there, lots of people believe that they can just go and do it because they're permitted to do it under permitted development. But you still have to get the council to confirm, in essence, that they're happy for you to do that.
That's correct, and we have this. We see this quite often with extensions and things like that, where people think that they can just engage a builder and build an extension as long as it met the permitted development rights. Well, that's not true. What you have to do is you have to go to the local authority and say, okay, do you agree that this meets the permitted development rights? And they will say yes or no, and then that allows you to do it. So that's a different process to a full plan application. Class Q is exactly the same principle. So you're applying to the council to ask them to agree whether they believe it meets the permitted development rights approach to Class Q.
Okay, so if I were driving down the road, as we quite often do as a couple, we're looking, we live in the depths of the countryside, so we see lots and lots of barns, and we often look at them and go, wouldn't that make an amazing house? Wouldn't that look great under Class Q? But to clarify, you wouldn't necessarily be able to make that entire barn one home. It could only be up to 150 square meters. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Under Class Q.
Yeah, that's correct. There used to be a slightly different set of rules which allowed you up to 500 square meters for a dwelling, but that has now changed.
Yeah, because there are lots of historic barn conversions that are huge and amazing spaces. But now they've changed it, so they are effectively still a decent sized home. I mean, what would 150 square meters get you bedroom
That'd be a
wise?
4-bedroom house, wouldn't it?
So still a 4 bedroom home, just not quite as big as they used to be. And they've done that essentially to maximize the amount of homes or dwellings they can get out of these barns.
Yeah, the principle of the government bringing in the Class Q permitted development approach was that they wanted to maximise redundant buildings in the countryside. So they wanted those buildings then to feed into the housing stock and help with the shortage of housing that we have nationally.
Okay, so you can make some amazing homes where you wouldn't necessarily get planning permission for a regular home. Um, but what classes as an agricultural building? What qualifies as a
So
Class
the
Q?
building must have been a part of an agricultural holding, or must have been part of an agricultural holding as its last use.
Right.
That is something where people do fall down on. They have buildings which look very much like they are agricultural, but they've been used for something else in the meantime.
What would give me some examples of what what that something else could be.
It could be anything as simple as storing domestic furniture in it.
And that would
And that
scupper
would
you,
be enough for it not to be a class, the
an
last use to
agricultural.
be an agricultural building, because actually it's now become a storage building.
Goodness.
So you have to be really, really careful.
So just clarify for me what an agricultural use is. So that would be for storing farm machinery.
An agricultural use is anything to do with running that agricultural holding. So it could be farm machinery, it could be livestock, it could be hay, it could be a workshop, it could be any of those sorts of things. It could be grain, it could be for storage of grain, anything like that.
Just not your garden furniture
No, just not your garden furniture.
or your washing machine or any of those things.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for clearing that up. It could be, it doesn't have to necessarily be your classic barn, though. It could be a silo, it could be a piggery, it could be a multitude of different agricultural uses. And certainly as a practice, we've designed some really unique buildings under Class Q.
Yeah, I think people tend to think of barn conversions as red brick buildings with slate or double pan tile roofs. That's not true. This is about agricultural buildings in the round. So certainly there are barns that do that. We live in South Lincolnshire, so our barns tend to be um, much more related to mechanisation of agriculture post Second World War. So they are um, angle iron buildings with profiled steel, or they're large portal frames with asbestos or things like that. All of those buildings can be converted. And as you pointed out, you could even go as specific as a grain silo. We've done a couple of grain silos before, and they make fantastic spaces.
Really interesting spaces inside.
Yeah, yeah, and piggeries and all of these types of buildings have their own little quirky, really interesting elements to them. And piggeries, for instance, tend to have large ventilators on the roof, which are very utilitarian in terms of an agricultural building, but actually aesthetically they look really quite cool.
Okay, brilliant. So let's talk a little bit about conversion versus rebuilding. We're talking about permitted development here. So, what is permitted under this development?
Yeah, so we are talking about converting a building. So part of the regulations are that the building must be structurally sound and capable of conversion. Um, and what they are really saying is that they're not geared up for buildings that require significant amount of construction work. And when we say significant amount of construction work, if you think sort of like a Dutch barn with 4 open sides, well, that doesn't meet Class Q standards, because you would have to create 4 walls. There were no walls there in the first place.
So, that isn't even rebuilding, that is building.
Exactly, that's building. Yeah, exactly. Equally, you couldn't be in a position where you have to rebuild half the barn. That doesn't make sense either. The building has to be capable of conversion. Now, that doesn't mean that the building is perfect, and it doesn't mean that the building in its state as it is now, you have to compare it as in relation to whether it would pass building regulations for a dwelling. That doesn't make there's no logical sense, and no buildings would work like that.
No, they tend not to be insulated spaces with nicely rated windows and
Yeah,
closable doors all of the
exactly,
time.
exactly. So there are elements that are permitted. So you are permitted to change cladding. You are permitted to insert windows and doors. You're permitted to insert floors,
Services.
services, insulation. All of those things. All of those things make that compliant with building regulations as a dwelling, not as an agricultural building.
Yeah, it's part of converting it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And equally, there will also be situations where the building in itself has become slightly dilapidated, because naturally what happens is that the building must be redundant.
Yeah,
And
it's
when the building is
disused.
redundant, I mean, and that's part of the regulations, the building must be redundant. If it's redundant, it's been sat there for a while.
Right.
So it's not going to work out. It's not going to have perfect walls, perfect doors. But it doesn't mean that you can't maintain it. And it doesn't mean logically that if there are elements that could be maintained relatively easily, i.e., rehanging a door, reglazing some windows, changing some cladding, a cladding sheet, because ultimately, um,
It's a bit worse for wear.
it's a bit worse for wear. Or what tends to happen with profiled steel is that it tends to just rust from the bottom upwards. All of that's normal stuff. So there's nothing that would stop you maintaining that building. And in my view, as part of the process, we would equally say that those elements are not rebuilding. What they are is maintaining the building.
Right, definitely. So that's where it can become a little bit sticky in terms of planning. You have to be able to prove um, that this building is structurally capable to the planning officer, and not just expect them to assume that or believe that. You actually have to show that,
Yeah,
and that's where it can come sort of fall down sometimes. The building has to be structurally capable of holding the loads. So if you're putting in another floor, you have to show that that's possible.
yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So what else does the council have to consider, and what could they consider under prior approval?
So they generally consider all the normal things that you would consider for dwellings. So transport highways, um, flood risk, ecology. Ecology is an important one in relation to barn conversions because I don't think we've had many barn conversions where we don't have at least some bats or some barn owls or something of those sorts, and they
And
need to
they're all
be
protected, aren't
they're all
they?
protected species and they need to be assessed properly and appropriate mitigation measures put in place and equally enhancement at the end. Um, all of those sorts of things. So it's a noise as well. But all of these are looked at in relation to the appropriateness of a dwelling in that area.
Yeah, definitely. So what could we design under Class Q? We've got this barn. It's structurally capable. We reckon we could get about four dwellings um in there. What could we design under Class Q?
So you're constrained to work within the footprint of the building,
Right?
but that depends upon the side of sort of spaces. So very big barns, you tend to have lots of footprint, lots of volume, and it allows you to do lots of different things. So it allows you to split the barn up into several units, perhaps open up some of the portal frames. We've done this in the past, whereby you expose some of the portal frames and you create internal courtyards or connection of a courtyard to a further garden and those sorts of things. So you can create some really, really cool, nice spaces. We've talked about silos, we've talked about piggeries. We've relatively recently done a mixed barn. So one area of the barn was a red brick with a slate roof, and then attached to it was a much more modern angle iron profile steel. And we've effectively done a black rectangle attached to this red rectangle in terms of, but all of one side was open, so we glazed all of that whole side,
Mm-hmm.
and then that allows you to then have amazing views of gardens, amazing views of open fields,
Yeah,
lots of light, all of those sorts of things, and a modern barn is actually very good at allowing you to have that level of flexibility in terms of how you introduce light and shadow and views and things like that. Whereas historically, a brick barn's a little bit more constrained.
definitely. And I think these more modern barns, they tend to be more structurally sound anyway, especially if they're sort of steel portal frame and things like that. They are
Hmm.
very structurally sound. Um, we've spoken there about sort of the larger barns. We touched on the silos there. What's the smallest barn you could you could convert under Class Q?
So all of the conversions have to meet national design standards, and within the national design standards are uh, floor areas that are in relation to number of bedrooms and occupation of those bedrooms. So the smallest unit you could do would be a one bedroom, one person unit, and the size of the smallest unit would therefore be a 37 square meter unit.
Okay, brilliant. What are the common pitfalls under Class Q? Because it sounds like the dream. You find a barn in a field with amazing views, Where can it go wrong for people?
I think the number one is always establishing the use.
Hmm.
So we have been caught out in the past ourselves
Hmm.
where we've believed a barn to be agricultural. The client has everything to suggest it has, and then a bit of paper has been produced that actually suggested it was something else, and that creates a problem for you. So the number one issue is ensuring that it is an agricultural barn. The second I would suggest is looking at the design and thinking, okay, well, what can I achieve here? Can I achieve actually what I would like to do based around the parameters of Class Q?
Yeah, because there are parameters. It's got to be, the wording is reasonably necessary. So the changes are reasonably necessary
Hmm.
to allow the conversion. So
Yeah.
you can't go changing all of the walls. You can't um make it bigger. You have to work within the footprint. What else is there in
Well,
there?
there are certain circumstances where you can extend the building, and that's part of the updated regulations that came into effect, and that's to
So
do with
that's if there's an extended footprint of the foundations, right?
no, so it's to do with hard standing. So, for
Right,
instance,
hard
if there
standing.
was a hard standing element around the barn, which actually
Most
uh,
do, right?
most modern barns do, most older ones don't.
Oh, okay.
So a barn will have that for the obvious reason if they want access all the way around. So you'll have a concrete
Yeah, you'll
hard
have
standing of some
sort of
sort.
a driveway where you can sort of
Yeah,
reach all
that's a
sides of the barn.
relatively modern kind of invention of sort of the 70s onwards.
Okay.
Historically, before that, it was just tracks. So that doesn't allow you to do that. But if you do have hand standing and it is at the rear of the barn, you can extend up to 4 meters at the back of it.
Wouldn't that technically be rebuilding a whole wall?
Well, no, because you're permitted to have that extension. So yes, it is, but it's permitted as part of the permitted development rights.
Absolutely. And it is it's a grey area. It's it's not a tick box exercise, is it? It's not.
No,
It's very,
it's very nuanced, and you
yes.
have to assess every barn as you see it
Mm,
based on the brief. And that goes back to what we were just saying a minute ago, which is you have to understand the constraints of the barn, and you have to understand that you're going to have to compromise a little bit to get what you want. It's not going to be perfect.
no. Barn conversions tend to be quite honest looking buildings. They have a history and that should be celebrated.
Hmm.
Um, and I think they make for some amazing spaces, really interesting buildings sort of to look at, but also to live in. The spaces created can be wonderful, especially if you're looking at sort of the barreled roofed barns or piggeries we've mentioned that are quite often curved buildings, aren't they?
Yeah,
They can make really cool homes,
yeah, definitely.
but they're also very honest.
Yeah, yeah.
They still look like the agricultural building on the outside, and that's the whole point of a conversion, right?
Yeah, I mean, we would always approach it like that. So we tend to approach these things in a modern way.
Mhm.
But even when a barn is historic, we will still take the same approach, and that approach is to allow it to be honest, to allow it to show what it was and what it's become.
Yeah, definitely.
And both are fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think historic barns are always so full of character. You can see the exposed beams quite often. Some still have the big sliding doors on them. Um, and I think they're really beautiful.
Mhm.
And
It's interesting that you call that character, because I would say that that is just part of the architecture of the time. Um, and equally, a modern portal frame barn does exactly the same thing. It's just in a different era.
yeah, yeah, I think it's that sort of period history you would call character in sort of a Victorian villa or something like that. You can see the history within that
Hmm.
building. Um, it's just a lot later in time than
Yeah,
sort of that portal frame. So, any other mistakes we see under Class Q? So we've spoken about rebuilding versus conversion. We've spoken about establishing the use. We've spoken about um, the extension a little bit there and ensuring that it's structurally capable.
yeah.
Are there any other pitfalls when it comes to Class Q?
I think that pretty much covers most things. What I would say is that when you're making the plan application, you make the plan application on the building alone, and weirdly, you don't take into account any garden space or anything like that. We have in the past with clients made applications whereby we changed the use of the land to a garden. Haven't always needed to do that, but it's just something to be mindful of.
Yeah. And all of these bonds, we should say, have to have access to a road, don't they,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
to be able to be established. So we've spoken a little bit there about the honesty of a conversion and the compromises one might have to make. When would you do a full application? What full planning applications can you do on a barn versus Class Q? And why would you choose one over the other?
Um, so so you can use a mechanism called fallback to assist in certain situations. So fallback is a mechanism whereby you have an established planning permission or an established permitted development right or a theoretical and implementable um,
Conversion.
potential. Yeah. And you use the fallback as a mechanism to allow you then to, for instance, if you wanted to change the design slightly, you wanted to enhance the design and make certain things better, and you felt you were too constrained by certain things, you would make a full plan application as a new plan application, and you would cite that by having the existing permission, that's of significant material consideration. And on that basis, as long as you are enhancing the scheme, because why would a local authority approve a scheme that wasn't better than the last one? The answer is they wouldn't, and rightly so. As long as you are enhancing it, then you should be in a position whereby you are going to get an approval to that full planning permission.
Okay, brilliant. So we have looked recently at appeals and case law on the exact thing you're talking about there, the fallback. And it kind of comes into a two-tier system where you have to prove that that theoretical conversion is absolutely implementable, like you said there. So making sure that this could really happen and it's not just a dilapidated barn that might be able to be converted. So let's put a building there. That's not what we're talking about here.
No,
You have to be able to
you have to
prove
demonstrate it. Yeah.
that that conversion is absolutely achievable. And then the second part of that is making sure it's better than the original. So that could be that the barn conversion wouldn't be that aesthetically pleasing from the outside, so you may want to change a little bit more than you'd be able to under Class Q. You might want to add more windows. You might want to make it slightly bigger. Is that allowed under fallback?
Yes, yeah, it is. So you're absolutely right. Fallback in itself is almost a tick box, and then the what people generally refer to as betterment. I think
Mm-hmm.
we would call it enhancement, um, as the weighting to which how much weighting should be in the planning balance related to fallback. And you're absolutely right. It could be a visual thing in terms of the appearance of the building. It could be the fact that actually, if you just made the building a little bit wider here, a little bit deeper here, actually, as an overall, the building is much better. It could be a density thing. So, where on sites where there's multiple dwellings, you could go from 5 to 3. And in a rural location, I think generally the thought process would be that that's a betterment because in relation to density because of the rural location. So density being much the density in the rural areas being a lot less than in urban areas.
Yeah.
And then equally there are lots of other reasons to do it, and you can look at betterment in terms of um, how the building is positioned on site, for instance, and you could look at amending that slightly. You could look at ecology. You could look at biodiversity net gain. All of those things add to betterment.
Yeah, because those three dwellings that you spoke about could be potentially three bigger houses than would be allowed under Class Q, but because the density has changed, that would be a betterment.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so give me some examples that we at Studio 11 have achieved under Class Q and indeed fallback.
So we've kind of talked about how you could take an existing design and then amend that and make a full plan application using the existing permission as a fallback position. So we talked about that, and that's fairly straightforward. What is also possible to do, it's also possible to say, okay, well, I don't want to do that at all. What I want to do is this, and that might be a single dwelling or it might be multiple dwellings. And very often you can come up with a design as an entirely new scheme that is significantly better than some of the barns that could be converted and would be permitted under Class Q. And for instance, we've done a scheme of 9 dwellings where we had 2 barns that were, one was okay, one was a bit ropey, didn't offer the best accommodation in terms of the end result. Both were fully compliant, but actually, as an overall scheme and a complete new scheme, so a new full plan application using fallback as the starting position, the overall new design was significantly better for the site and the area.
And they are 9 absolutely beautiful eco homes with the most stunning views.
Yeah, yes, they are. Yeah, so then we've gone from fallback now to the betterment or enhancement, as we would say, and the enhancement for this site was the design, BNG,
Eco credentials.
a level of significant more eco credentials than you would get for just a normal barn conversion.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, Class Q is a really handy tool in rural planning permissions, both for farmers with redundant barns on their holding. That could definitely be something they could look at to sort of create some revenue. But if you're looking for that dream rural location, absolutely drive past barns, look up who owns them, contact them. It might be that they would sell them to you, and you could achieve great things there. And it doesn't have to be that exact barn, but actually sometimes that exact barn could make some incredible spaces and an amazing home.
Yeah, no, I agree. We've had projects where we've done a full Class Q and it's a fabulous end result. We've done projects where we've done the Class Q and sort of said to clients, okay, well, actually, you could probably do something slightly different here if you wanted to. And the end result is something completely new. But
Yeah,
again, it's a fabulous solution as well.
definitely. So don't be afraid if you are searching for your dream rural location to go and look at, but well, maybe don't trespass on people's land, but go and find out who owns these barns. Look at these barns as a serious potential contender because they could just end up to be your dream home.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. We'll see you next time.